You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and welcome back to episode number 92 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, sponsored by Trailtopia Adventure Foods. The past couple of episodes, we've concentrated on young women. No particular reason, but I was recently moving home and found a card of a guy I'd met at Trail Days in 2017, not even this year. When I checked my notes, I realised why I'd kept the card. His name is Buddy Wier, and he has a remarkable story to tell of an adventurer who waited until retirement to really step up his adventuring. Buddy is an example to everybody who says to you, I couldn't hike 500 miles or 1,000 or, in fact, any miles. Buddy shows how it can be done and tells us his story of a fascinating post-retirement life. Buddy will be along soon. We're also missing out on
If I Hit It Again.
Yep, I know it's silly, but I just can't resist it. Yet we're missing out on that segment by having a conversation with the mother and father of one of my previous guests and fellow member of the class of 2014, Stacey Bucklin. Kathi and Bob Bucklin and I have a great conversation about what it's like when your daughter announces that she's off to walk in the woods and over mountains. For many people, you'll recognise Kathi and Bob's original reactions, yet they articulate their fears and how those fears were and can be allayed. I highly recommend that you stick around for this chat because there is something in it for everybody. We're moving on quickly in our book, The Year We Seized the Day by Elizabeth Best and Colin Bowles. This week, we're at Chapter 4 as Ellie recovers from her early sickness on the trail. But before we get onto all of that, it is breakfast time. When I was hiking, I'd wake up to my alarm, deflate my AirPad and contemplate my blah breakfast. Every morning I poured water into those different coloured paper bags, scrunched around the ingredients, not one of which had any association with fruit, and then eat that soulless gunk. I then find unhydrated powder and sugar in the crevices of the bag. Trailtopia's blueberry oatmeal is a bit of a novelty because it actually has real blueberries. Who'da thunk? No gunk. It tastes great, the bag design ensures complete hydration, and it really sets you up for the day. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So, with breakfast settling comfortably in our bellies and a day of walking ahead, let's have a chat with Joel Wier III, or Buddy. Okay, I'd like to introduce Joel A. Wier III, or Buddy. Hi, Buddy, how are you?
Buddy, it's just great, and I'm fine. And Steve, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you.
Well, nice to speak to you. We actually met in Trail Days in 2017, and I took some notes, and you were somebody I wanted to speak to, and I found your card only recently, so that was quite helpful for me to get back to you then. And you, like me, are a bit of a late bloomer when it comes to hiking, aren't you? When did you first start hiking as a youngster?
Actually, I was in Boy Scouts and had a very great experience there with monthly weekend camps and 2-week summer camps, but we didn't do any backpacking in terms of covering a lot of distance. It was mostly site camping that we did, right. And had a very active troop. But so I really got into hiking, backpacking in 2005 when I retired at age 61.
Yes.
With the just went to a backpacking shop, and I was kind of mesmerized by the equipments and the little stoves, and I said, how can we do this?
That's funny enough. I want to come back to that because you said, and there's one of the words I wrote down, that exact word. You said that because you'd retired, you were looking for another outlet, I guess, in your life. And when we spoke, you told me that you were mesmerized by the equipment. What do you think about the equipment that attracted you so much on a sort of visceral level?
Well, and when I say I was looking for something else to do, actually, I was one of the reasons I retired was that I was a stockbroker in my previous life, and I But I had started spending about half of my time on mental health issues, and I was getting a lot of fulfillment out of that. So I really retired so I could spend more time with that. So it wasn't that I needed something to do. I was probably spending more time as a volunteer working than I did working a career. But anyway, I happened to go into a backpacking shop, and I thought, well, this might be kind of fun to get involved with. And so I bought one of the Whisper Light stoves, and I saw the titanium, pots. And I guess I bought a down sleeping bag and bought a tent, and thought, well, maybe I can get involved in doing it. Bought a backpack, too. And really just kind of said, well, maybe it'd be something worthwhile to start doing.
Yeah. So how did you get your gear together? Did you just get advice from the gear shops, or did you start reading a lot of stuff, or just order it online?
Primarily, I bought it from a nice backpacking shop, the Backpacker here in Columbia, South Carolina. And they were very helpful in terms of sizing and, talking about down and, the other fills that you can get. And I won't say that I bought everything that I bought from them, but, that was kind of my base for getting started.
Yeah. Did you find that was a pleasant experience, though? Because the problem is when you go to some of these gear shops, it's a bit like going to buy a new mobile phone. I knew nothing about hiking at all, so I really didn't know what I really needed. And you don't know what you don't know, do you? Did you start learning?
Exactly right.
Did you start learning that stuff? And did you find that the stuff that they provided you with was good for your hiking when you actually got to hike?
Well, the first, I would say yes, it fulfilled the need. The one thing that I did not pay enough attention to that I learned not too long afterwards, it may have been a couple years, because was that weight makes a lot more difference than I think some of the backpacking people emphasize. They're emphasizing comfort and being able to carry the stuff you want to carry with you rather than getting the weight down.
So they got you some stuff, and you kind of you were looking to start off with something. You started off, I understand, with the Palmetto Trail in South Carolina. Is that right?
Yes, the Palmetto Trail is a trail that they're still working on, but it's pretty much complete. That goes from the mountains in South Carolina to the coast.
Nice.
And so I decided to do the section that goes from Columbia, it's a little bit east of Columbia, down to the coast. And so in 2006, I might go back though. In 2005, I don't know that I actually took any hikes after I retired and bought some of this equipment.
All right.
But I did go to Turkey, and I took my sleeping bag with me because I'd been to Greece one winter, and it had been cold in the place. If I'd had my sleeping bag, it would have been much better. And I was planning to, I hate to say hostile it, but just was trying to be a little bit cautious, I guess. And that's actually a theme that I'd like to carry forward in this conversation, is how helpful, if you're a traveler, your backpacking equipment can be if you just take small parts of it with you in terms of opening up opportunities for you.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, I was in New Zealand in 2016. If I hadn't taken my boots and my hiking poles with me, I wouldn't have hiked up to to this volcano.
Right.
If on a trip down to South America, I got off a ferry, and these people were talking about taking a 3-day hike in Torres del Paine in Patagonia, and I had my sleeping bag, my pack, my rain gear. I was basically traveling around with a backpack with that kind of stuff in it, more with the idea of trying to be prepared. And so I had this great 3-day hike and got to see the mountains at Torres del Paine that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do if I hadn't had the gear with me. And I didn't have cook stuff with me. I just had, the stuff that can protect you.
It's interesting. You hadn't done any hiking really, and you first got into it, and then you really got into it, didn't you? Because you talked about New Zealand and South America, but going back to the Palmetto Trail, what did you get from that? If that was your first overnight proper backpacking trip of a number of miles, what were you getting from it?
I set off to do about 60 to 70 miles, I forget, somewhere in that range, and about half of the leg down to the coast. And I walked on in forest. I walked in swamps. I walked in. Had to get across. Get somebody in a boat to get across the section where the bridge was out in a river. I came across a bunch of alligators very near where I hoped to camp, and I tried to set up near the big water rather than back near the more marshy stuff, just hoping to be a little bit further away from them if they decided to come up where I was. So, I mean, just the experience of, okay, I'm going to find some water here, or the filtration gear. I started off with a Katahdin, pump. I now use a Sawyer and also have one of those UV things that I take with me when I'm traveling. But the gear just opens up opportunities, I guess.
Isn't that interesting that you'd never really done this? So did you feel kind of comfortable straight away in the forest?
Well, I'm not a timid person. I have had some worldly experience. I was a naval aviator and did have some survival training type things. But that, in some respects, there are so many people involved that, that you really weren't in any kind of danger and not out in the same way that you're in wilderness, in the ones that I did, both in the United States and the Philippines. As you are, say, in the mountains, the White Mountains or something like that, where you could go a day or two. And back in South Carolina on this, the next year when I did another 60 miles down to the coast through the Francis Marion Forest here in South Carolina, I went 2 days without seeing anybody.
Wow. And do you enjoy that?
It doesn't bother me. I enjoy seeing people and talking with people, but I'm really doing what I'm doing because I have a goal in mind to get from here to there, and I want to see what's between here and there.
Right. That's a good way of putting it, actually. So you've already said New Zealand and South America. What was the trip to South America about? Was it you took your pack just in case you were going to go hiking, or you planned to go backpacking around South America?
Well, no. I had actually thought that my wife and I were going to go down to the Galapagos and Machu Picchu, and she decided the weather wasn't quite what she wanted it to be during that season, and I had my heart on going. Right. And so I just took my backpack, and she dropped me off at the airport, and I flew into Lima, Peru, because it's closer to the Atacama Desert in northern Chile than Santiago, Chile is. And so really when I travel, I don't plan a lot or have pretend that I know all the things I'm going to do. I'm a traveler that goes to see what's there. And for instance, I have some interesting stories, but just make it this short. I wound up at the Nazca Lines down in southern Peru. I got to see them, take a flight over them, and I had never heard of the Nazca Lines. And people who are listening to this will probably think, well, that's kind of strange. Everybody knows about that. But then I enjoyed going to the Atacama Desert, stayed in a hostel, and, met, people who might be biking through that desert. One guy from Holland, I remember. And then wound up just taking local buses down through Chile, down to Tierra del Fuego. And I mentioned this, stopping in, Patagonia. And then because I was out to dinner one night in Ishwara with a guy from France and a guy from California, all the menus were in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. And so we were trying to look around and see what other people were eating. And this guy piped up and said, I'm having king crab Parmigiano. And we started talking to him because he was American, and he was the penguin expert on a ship. And I said, do you have any places going to Antarctica? And so the next day I was on a ship going to Antarctica for 11 days.
Oh, my gosh.
I couldn't have done that if I hadn't had my waterproof gear, my, down jacket, my, warm clothing, and just, I guess, also had a sense of adventure. I didn't have any waterproof gloves or a scarf, which they wanted you to have. Right. And I also didn't have any travel insurance, which they required you to have, which, fortunately, through Skype, I was able to get my wife to sign me up for.
What does your wife have to say about you wandering off all the time? Because you do a lot. I mean, I've got a list of places you've been to and you've done, and this is since you retired. Was she happy for you to be doing this, or did she ever consider coming with you at all?
Well, unfortunately, she can't do the backpacking and the arduous stuff, and has no interest in carrying a backpack. But we travel. We just got back a week ago from 3 weeks in Croatia and Montenegro. That was just, a vacation. Nice. And then once again, I did take some of my stuff with me. I didn't wind up using much of it, but I did take my, UV water filter, ultraviolet light, water filter, just in case I might need it. And
from my notes earlier on, you talked about South America, but you also had already done one of the Caminos in Spain, hadn't you?
Yeah. Interestingly, if you hear what we just said, I'm really I don't think of myself as being a really experienced, great backpacker, that sort of stuff, because maybe, one time a year or something like that, I'll do something, and it's really kind of goal-oriented rather than, okay, I'm going out to enjoy the outdoors or something like that. I mean, I enjoy the outdoors, don't get me wrong, but it's not really that, some people could go every weekend. I'm just not interested in doing that. Wow. But in 2009, I hiked the Foothills Trail, which in South Carolina, which is about an 80-mile trail between two South Carolina parks. That's right on the escarpment, and it's really a beautiful trail, well-manned and well-maintained, and I was out on that, and I said to myself, I don't think I could ever do the Appalachian Trail because I like to shower and good meal, and you're out here by yourself and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that was, I think, in July. And then in August, I went over to France to set off to hike a 500-mile segment of the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, which I started in the Puy-en-Velay. And we have some friends in Lyon that I know through Rotary International that had done the Camino, and they actually were nice enough to let me come to Lyon and then took me to the beginning of the trail. And so then I hiked 500 miles over about 30 days to Roncesvalles, Spain, where you pass through St. John Pied-de-Port in France to go over the Pyrenees, which is a lovely hike, and I was blessed with good weather that year. I know we did something in 2010, but I really can't remember what it was. I know my wife and I probably went to Europe to do something, but and then in 2011 is when I took that trip that we already have talked about to South America.
So this by now you're about mid-60s, aren't you? When you were doing these?
Well, I'm. Let's see. In 2010, I guess I would have been 66. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow. Now, as you said just now, the Appalachian Trail wasn't in your sights at all. You never thought you could or would want to do that. And from what you've said, it's interesting to me that you're goal orientated as opposed to just going out in the woods, and I understand that in many ways. But something changed in 2012. You saw a presentation by somebody, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Tell us about that.
Actually, in 2011, I went back over to France and Spain to hike another 500 miles to Santiago, Spain, and then that was a lot of fun. And then my daughter came over and hiked with me for a week. Sure. But one of my daughters did. But in 2012, I'm a member of the Foothills Trails Conference, and they had a picnic, and Jennifer Pharr Davis, who had just recently broken the record by anyone, both that she's a lady, to in terms of speed, and I think it was 47 days or 57 days to complete the whole Appalachian Trail, and she made a presentation, and it was interesting, and she showed some great pictures, and I said, well, maybe that would be an interesting thing to try. And so I came home and called up a friend who is very active in Boy Scouts and does hike a lot too, and interestingly now really guides people up professionally. In fact, he's on a trip right now out in Oregon. But he said he didn't know anybody who'd hiked the whole trail, but he knew a fellow Trip Clark, who had hiked in sections
Yeah.
since the early 2000s up to Kent, Connecticut. And so he put me in touch with him, and Trip was nice enough to let me come over and visit with him, and laid out all of his gear. And I think at that time I was looking for a lighter tent.
I'm sure.
And he said, why don't you try a hammock? And so he showed me his Blackbird hammock, and he liked it. My other friend also used a hammock, so, I bought one. And I didn't research it any more than that. And then here are two guys who know what they're doing. That's what they bought. I'll go along with them.
Yeah, no point in reinventing the wheel, is there? So you got some gear. What weight? So this means that I believe it was June 2013, at the age of 69 years of age, you started the AT at Springer, which is amazing. And did you intend to always do it in sections or long sections, or were you hoping to get there the whole way? Because starting in June is quite late, isn't it?
It was late, and the reason I was late, I'm active with Nami, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I was trying to help them get some legislation through our state legislature, and we were right on the cusp and needed the governor's signature, and so the legislative session ended, I think, on the 5th or 4th or something like that. So anyway, I started on June 5th. I certainly did have aspirations of doing it in one go, if I was able to do it. I got from someone a schedule that he has used to do it in 111 days.
Wow.
And I tried, maybe I can get that done. So I had kind of that, but I fell behind just real quickly. Yeah. And interestingly, the guy who has this 111 days, they don't really carry all their gear with them. They're being picked up at different road stops and stuff like that. So it's a different ball game.
Of course, yeah. And,
you can do 25 miles a lot easier than I certainly could, or 30 miles. Anyway, what my mantra was, I'm going to go as far as my energy and my enthusiasm take me.
Which one ran out first, your energy or your enthusiasm?
I just really ran out of time.
Yeah.
So I started in June. I got up to, Buena Vista, I think, Virginia, and I got a call from my daughter saying we had a leak in our had some hardwood floors in the kitchen were rippled, and so she got somebody to come look at it, and they said, well, we need to tear out your kitchen. So I thought somebody might need to go home and pay attention to that, because my wife was at our beach house in Oregon, and it was just easier for me to come back. So I came back to Columbia in August for about 3 to 4 weeks, and then they had to season the wood to go back in after they torn it out. And I said, I'm not going to wait for that to happen, so I'll just leave that for my wife when she gets home. And so I got back on the trail, I guess the early part of September. And so I was on the trail about 15 weeks that summer. I got off October the 14th, and it was starting to get down, below freezing at night up in Connecticut. And so I got to Kent, Connecticut.
You made some really good progress then, really. I mean, that's quite amazing. So, and the thing about your hiking is because you hadn't in the past done long, well, you actually done the couple of 500 milers. You probably had really strong legs anyway. But what were your early miles like in Georgia? Because I don't think Georgia's easy, do you, to start with?
Well, I think the first day I remember was 12 miles, because I started in Amacola and then hiked up to the approach trail and then to the second shelter. During that first 15 weeks, I averaged just about 15 miles a day.
Wow,
that's and that would be, that would be having some 2-mile days to, I think my longest day was a 26-mile day, where you're kind of set up to have a big day in the Cumberland Valley going through Pennsylvania.
Right. Did you find yourself getting into a rhythm of the hike? I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, how you suddenly start realizing that you're in a rhythm that you hadn't realized you needed to get into, and there's something about continuing. Yeah, sweet spot. I found that trying, roughly 17 to 19 miles was kind of a reasonable, kind of hope for a day. And, I'd have a target to get to someplace,
in that range, and if the target didn't make sense, then I might shorten it up. Or I remember one day in Tennessee, it had been rainy and it was threatening weather, and I decided to walk out to the first shelter leaving. I forget the name of the town, and I got there, and the weather looked great, and I was able to get a connection. So I looked at the radar and I said, "Oh, this looks okay." So I decided to, press on, and I guess I went. I don't even remember where I went to, but it was another 11 or so, 12 miles further on, and I, got that dark, and then the thunderstorm came. So I was kind of lucky, but.
Oh dear! I must say that sounds like a lot of mileage. How did you hike for long hours? Did you start early and finish quite late? That's a lot of miles, averaging 17 to 19.
Well, no, I didn't average 17, 19. I said, I averaged over that period about 15 miles a day. Mm-hmm. So, I'd have some days that were certainly less than that. I'm just saying that I would feel comfortable kind of hoping for that kind of thing. Now, that certainly was not in the first few days that I was out. No. I know going over Blood Mountain, I think I had to do 13 or maybe it was 15 because I didn't have a bear canister. Yeah. And so from wherever I started from to get over there without camping, and it wound up having to be in the rain too. I think it may have been a 15-mile day, and that may have been my first 15-mile day or something. And, maybe my first 19-mile day or something, or whatever it was, in that range, maybe 20 miles, might have been someplace in the Smokies where I said, okay, I can make this. You kind of just mentally say, I'm going to push myself a little bit to get there or something.
I must say, you must be an inspiration to a lot of senior people at the moment, because a lot of people say they can't do this stuff, but you were never really a hiker until you retired. And to have really got into this and actually done these miles at the age of 69, I think it's remarkable for you. And how did you actually relate to your fellow, I guess mostly younger hikers? Did you get on well with the youngsters? And did you find that side of it
I got
pretty
along
good
with
thing?
Pretty much everybody who was a nice person. And there were certainly some people that I wanted to leave behind, and then maybe they wanted to leave me behind too. There was, I guess, what I found was that the young people really, they can keep up much faster paces than I could. So, I might see them someplace and then I would see them at the destination that night or something like that. And there were 2 or 3 people that it was probably close to 2 weeks that we were together going through, Virginia. And I think I got along, well with them, and I enjoyed, hearing what they had to do. Their antics were a little more lively than I am at my age, of course. But and the other thing too, my philosophy about traveling is I'm going to see what's there. I'm not trying to take with me what I live with all the time. I'm going someplace different because I want to see something different.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I say that whether it's on the trail or whether it's going to South America. I'm going there because it's South America. I wouldn't be going if it weren't different. So.
That's great. And funny, I always thought the youngsters, I think I got on well with most of them anyway, because I think this trail is such a great equalizer. You all arrive at the same shelter and you all got stories about what's gone on. And were you given a trail name or were you always buddy?
Well, I gave myself a trail name. As I said, I'm active in Nami, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I thought, well, this is a good way to maybe raise some, be an advocate for the mentally ill. So I took the name Nami, the acronym Nami, and so that's what I went by.
Oh, nice. And so the next year, 2014, and which actually is the year I hiked, you went back to, I presume, Connecticut, where you'd finished, and hiked with the intent.
I did. In fact, it was nice. I had met a couple of gentlemen, one from Connecticut and a fellow from New York, and I called them up to say, how's the best way for me to get to, Kent from flying into New York? And so I took the train from New York up to near a town in New York to one of them picked me up, and then they took me down and helped me have some fuel and a couple other things that I needed to get started that I couldn't bring on the airplane. And so there was, you might say, some trail magic because of somebody I'd met the year before that I picked up the phone to call.
You did intend to finish that year, didn't you? But that didn't happen, did it?
Correct. No, it didn't. I went ahead and hiked, got to Gorham, New Hampshire, about 400 miles into the 700 miles I had left.
Right.
And I had been, the night before I got there, I had bad sweats and I guess pumperella fever or something like that. But anyway, I wound up being diagnosed in the emergency room with a tick bite and then the illness that I had was babesiosis. That's attacks your red blood cells, and your hemoglobin goes down. And then, so anyway, I spent a couple of days in the emergency room and then flew home. And about a week later, they called me up and said, well, you also have Lyme disease. I never really had any symptoms that I know of Lyme disease, but I did take the medicine for it and don't have any lingering effects from either one of them.
You cleared of Lyme now, or does it stay within you?
No, I have really never had any symptoms of the Lyme. It was in my blood, but I don't have anything that I know of right now that is lingering from it. No.
So where did you have to stop then? You say Gorham, New Hampshire, and Gorham, New Hampshire is the start of some really beautiful hiking, isn't it? So the following year, you went back there to Gorham, I presume.
I went back there the next year, and I must admit that climbing, the Wildcat Mountain coming up out of there was, I think, the hardest climb I have ever made. I could not believe that it took me so long to do in fact, I'd planned to go 13 miles that day, and I only made 6, I think it was, I wound up staying in the hut, which was not my plan. Right. And anyway, but it was tough. But anyway, I did go ahead, and then from Gorham, hiked the rest of the way to Katahdin in 2015.
So that was another goal-oriented thing completed. You finished it. What do you think that hiking really offers a senior person these days? Because so many people have written to me and saying that our guests have really inspired them. And you're now 74, I believe, aren't you? You're 74.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you're 74 now. And you started doing your hike of the AT when you were 69. What do you think the senior person can learn from this?
Well, I would encourage people to try to stay in decent shape all the time so that they can try. I know that there's some people who aren't as lucky as I am, blessed as I am to, be in as physically good shape as I am. But to me, you can start off with just a walk in the woods or something like that and say, okay, well, that was fun, and then go buy yourself some hiking sticks. And interestingly, I read an article, and that was something that was kind of a mantra to me, too, is in Backpack Magazine, that hiking sticks will increase your efficiency up to 25%. Oh, really? And my philosophy was, well, I probably don't use them correctly, but if I get 10% out of them, that's a lot. And I do think that makes a lot of difference for somebody in terms of stabilizing your knees and that sort of stuff. Definitely, yeah. Did you have any problems with your knees or any other injuries? I know you got the bite, but did you get any bad injuries at all while you were doing your hike? I did take a fall on that right after I'd left Gorham, and I forget, maybe going to Amherst. I think I stepped off of a rock onto a loose one and fell down and crashed and hurt my knee. And for several days, I really couldn't bend it very well. Moving from one rock to another, I had to kind of favor one or, trying to get off some elevation. Yeah. I did get back after my hike, and my knees were still bothering me. And after my, getting to Katahdin, I went to see an orthopedist, and he took a X-ray and MRI, I forget which, maybe both. And the report came back and said that I had broken my knee. So,
oh my gosh!
I had cracked the bone in it and hadn't known it. But anyway, apparently the pain must have faded somehow. Otherwise, my mobility improved a little bit. So.
That is amazing. So have you continued to hike in the last couple of years, and have you got any goals still to achieve in as far as hiking is concerned?
Well, it's interesting how your goals can pop up. In 2016, I went over to hike in France and Switzerland, the Haute Alps Trail, which goes from Chamonix, France, to Zermatt, where the Matterhorn is. Now, I wasn't intending to climb the Matterhorn, but I'd never heard of that. But I saw someone on Facebook, a friend, actually a lady who I'd met in Antarctica, who had posted some beautiful pictures there. So a couple years beforehand, and so the time was available, and so I went and did that last September. I guess it was August, September of 2016, and that was an interesting hike. It beautiful sunshiny days, and then it rained a couple days, and then had 8 inches of snow. So that's another thing where the gear makes a lot of difference in terms of.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that I would try to emphasize to any listener, I mentioned gear and weight. When I first started off, I think my pack weighed about 40 pounds. Yeah. And now, and that would be with food for 6 or 7 days. Now, and this, you certainly hear people who are a lot less than this too. So don't get me wrong. I'd be 27 pounds or something like that now if I started off for 3 or 4 days. Might be a little bit more than that if I was for 6 days or so. But weight is really an important thing. And the other thing I try to emphasize is that it seems like so many people buy packs that weigh 6 pounds, but you can get the same sort of comfort out of one that weighs 2 pounds. Yeah. So there's 4 pounds that offers you no advantage that I would just encourage people to be aware of.
Yeah, well, I know I took way too much, and I started at 42 pounds, and when I went home, because I got injured, I came back with 35 pounds. So I lost 7 pounds of stuff I never actually used. So I don't think you realise before you do this how little you need to live on, do you? You can really live on very little at all. Well, look, I'm so inspired by you. I tell you, you've done amazing things since you retired, and it seems to be going on and on. Now you're 74 years old, so I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us, buddy.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I hope that some of the listeners will benefit and just give it a try.
Thank you so much.
As far as your energy and enthusiasm will take it.
Absolutely. Boy, if you do another long distance hike, let me know again. I want to hear about it, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed visiting with you.
He's quite an action man in his retirement, isn't he? I thought it was interesting how he sets himself goals, and it's very goal-oriented. It's as if he sees a challenge to conquer and prepares accordingly. Taking his gear with him when he goes on so-called normal holidays is quite the clue to how much the hiking bug has bitten him, isn't it? And what about Jennifer Pharr Davis? She is such an inspiration to so many people, and really I hope that she hears this one day. She is directly responsible for Buddy getting onto the trail at the age of 69 and finishing the darn thing at 71. That is an awesome responsibility, and one that I hope that she really embraces and enjoys. Even finished with a broken knee. Please, please never say that you can't do something until you've at least given it a shot. Great stuff. Just before we get on to Kathi and Bob Bucklin, I wanted to let you know that I have a new email address. In future, if you want to reach out to me at the shows, email me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com. I was going to also announce a new Facebook page for the Hiking Radio Network, but I just couldn't get it done by today. Many of you have friended me on Facebook, for which I thank you, but I really need a central spot for all the shows, and not least because some people are getting a bit cheesed off with me posting my shows every week to about 25 hiking websites. In the future, when the Facebook page is up, I'm going to put the link on the new Facebook page and probably 1 or 2 others. I hope that you, my listeners, will help to spread the show within your own networks. You'll be doing me and the shows a big favour, and I won't be getting on the wrong side of some of these administrators. That will definitely be up and running in a couple of days, and you're all welcome to like the page. Now, it's Kathi and Bob, mother and father of Stacey Bucklin, with their take on what it's like to be told that your darling daughter is going to live like a homeless person for about 6 months. As you'll hear, they didn't exactly take it in their stride, but they worked out the best way to handle it from their perspective. Okay, I'm on the phone with Kathi and Bob Bucklin. Hi guys, how are you?
Great, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, the reason you're on, we interviewed Stacey Bucklin, or Styles, who I hiked with in 2014. And I know that you and I have had some contact through social media a couple of times, Kathi, and I thought it'd be really important for some listeners to hear what it's like for the person at home while their son or daughter, in this case your daughter, is out hiking. So the first question is really, what was your initial reaction to Stacey telling you that she was planning to hike the AT?
Initially, I was very surprised, but I knew she had been researching it and reading on it. And I noticed she started acquiring pieces of camping equipment that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
But after going through it, but then my initial reaction was for her safety because I did not know enough about the trail. So I was concerned. As a young female hiking by herself, I had some safety concerns.
Yeah, I can understand that. And particularly, I would think as a father as well, Bob, you must have been, I would have been in a terrible state if my daughter had told me that. How do you feel about it?
Well, I was questioning why, what's the reason? And you're going to quit your job and you're going to do what? and I really didn't understand the Appalachian Trail at all. I knew she was interested and loved the outdoors. I knew that whatever she wanted to do, she'd put her mind to it. But safety was probably the biggest thing that I was concerned about.
How did she articulate her why to you? Did she explain it to you in terms that you could buy into?
I think so, but just knowing her and where she was in her life and what she wanted to do, it made perfect sense. I don't know that you can always explain why, completely, because you're discovering things about yourself, and but we were very proud of her for her preparation and for her knowledge, and we knew that she would set her mind to it. But I think we were satisfied that she prepared herself mentally and physically, that so it sort of defined itself.
Sure. So you thought she was pretty well equipped as a person to take on the trail, because I think you probably learned, I suppose, from your own research as well, that a vast majority of this hike is mental more than physical. And you thought because she was about 30 when she went, 29, 30, something like that, wasn't she?
She was 30, 31, I think.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so you felt that she was well equipped as a person to take on that challenge.
Yes, and she is very disciplined and always has been, and very dedicated and a very hard worker and very smart. So I knew, we knew that that was never going to be the issue. Now, whether you finish or not is really, we didn't understand that, and how that worked.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we understood and appreciated all of that. It just came down to just trying to understand her safety, who she was going to be with.
Didn't her friend quit on the approach trail? That must have alarmed you a bit.
It wasn't her friend.
Oh, wasn't it? Right.
She had said to us when I said, I don't think you should do this alone. And she said, well, I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to meet people online. Well, and that didn't bring me any great comfort.
Really? Hey, look, good Lord. It's funny.
But that's where she met these two other women, and they were from different parts of the country, and they started out together. One went home after the first night on the approach trail.
All right. Wow.
And then the other one, she went maybe a third of the way up with before they parted ways, because as you know, you hike with someone who hikes at your speed. And
that was Twist, wasn't it? That was Twist.
Right.
Kim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She was great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what did you?
So it was comforting that she was going to start with folks for sure.
Good. Yeah.
And I did follow blogs. I followed yours, and I followed a couple of others. But I was real careful. I tried not to read too much of the social media and stuff, because everyone had, you can read what you want to read, basically.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yeah. And so the people who were actually on the trail at that time, their blogs were wonderful. And we went and met her a few times. And so that all helped. By, the time she was in Virginia, I was real comfortable with what she was doing, because I knew she didn't want anything to happen to her, any more than I did. So
absolutely, yeah. So did you do much research yourself, or did Stacey point you in a direction to help you with your knowledge or understanding?
Yeah, she pointed me in a direction. She, said, read this, don't read that, this kind of thing. And so that was very helpful, trying to get ourselves educated. And what I thought the trail was like and what it actually turned out to be were two totally different things.
That's the same for every hiker, I think, as well.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful experience. And now, it's 4 years later, and Bob and I still, if you meet us and ask about our kids, we'll say our daughter hiked the Appalachian Trail and she was a thru hiker and she finished and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's such a moment in your life, even as her parents or a family member that achieves that. It's just so significant.
The people we met too were wonderful, very educated, very goal oriented, very focused. And we learned you had to be in order to even try this. Those that walk through.
I'm glad you say that, because hikers get a bad rap on social media, and almost universally, the people I met on the trail were helpful, were caring, and wanted your success. And some of the stuff and the descriptions of some people on the trail that you read, you think to yourself, I'd never met anybody like that, ever. Not once on the trail did I meet somebody like that. So I'm glad that you said that just then, Bob. And really, I know that you eventually became more comfortable that she was safe. Then you told me when we spoke before, when we were preparing to do this before, was that your concerns shifted more from her safety to her health. Why was that particularly?
Well, it's pretty grueling, as you know. And by the way, it's not just physical health; it's mental health too, because it's a long time. It's 6 months out there, and lots of different situations, and you have to finish. And you probably heard the story of me. Two requirements that I really wanted Stacey to agree to. One was that we would know where she was at all the time, because we just couldn't feel comfortable without knowing where she was. And then two, with that said, we could go and take care of her or get help if something happened. So she agreed to wear this spot GPS device. She didn't want to carry a bunch of batteries because of weight considerations, which we learned a lot about.
Yes.
Even cameras and stuff like that, they all add lots of weight. The spot, though, she did push every evening, and she said, "Mom and Dad, don't panic if for some reason this thing doesn't go off."
Yeah.
And it only happened 2 times in 187 days.
One
was weather related.
Did you panic?
The first one we did.
Well, to be honest, we stayed up all night and go, "Oh, okay, what's going on here?" We knew there was bad weather, but it didn't matter. It's one of those things. And then 2, she forgot one night, and it was pretty amazing. What was fun about it is that we knew exactly where she was, and it went to Google Maps, and we were able to zoom in and kind of see where she was, and sort of get a feel for the trail. I was exhausted just trying to follow the trail of all the miles she traveled, each day. And I kept thinking, my goodness, she's walking this. So that was, it was kind of a funny thing in a way, but it was very comforting as well.
Did you find that the spot was a really good way then to keep you connected in some way? Because I think a recommendation of if it eased your mind a bit about her, knowing where she is every night, that must be so reassuring in so many ways.
It was one night Bob came and said, "Look, she's in the parking lot of a church," and he could zoom in on Google Maps and see exactly she's at the parking lot of a church, and that's where they were camping. Because cell phone service can be spotty, as you know.
That's right.
And you just want to, at the end of the day, I just wanted to know that she was okay. And also on the spot, if she wasn't, there was an emergency button she could push that would alert us that she was in trouble, but it would also alert the rangers or whoever was around her that she was in distress and give them the coordinates. So if someone else were to get hurt on the trail, she could push it for them as well. So
how much did the spot cost? Do you know?
I think it's $150, and then you pay a yearly service. And I don't remember what that is, but I think it's $100 or something for a year. But it was
That's
well
well
worth
worth
it.
Yeah.
We're very, very happy with it. And the funny part about the spreadsheet, by the way, in the very beginning, I was tracking the average miles per day, and I said, "Stacy, you're not going to finish until December." And me not knowing, in the beginning, it's you're not physically ready. And anyway, it all worked out. But it was. I still have the spreadsheet. It's funny to look at it.
Did you consider hiking at all yourself? Did it inspire you to want to do this, or that was never an issue for you?
Well, we were both exhausted when we walked the approach trails. So,
I didn't make it up to the bridge.
Well, hard that may be to believe. Not only did I hike it 4 years ago when I was 61, I'm hiking it again next year when I'm 66, or I'm trying to anyway.
Okay,
so
yeah, that's great.
So why not? You'll be able to read the blog again, Kathi.
There you go.
So when she initially returned, after she'd finished that particular time, because as everybody knows, because we've interviewed her on the show, did you notice changes in her, or was she still the same Stacy, or was there an edge that had changed on her?
I think she was the same. She came back and, first couple of days she was sore.
Yeah.
And she was sleeping a lot and, that kind of thing, your muscles and your
Sure.
your body's been through a lot. So I
it.
think it took her a little time to recover from that, but she, I think she missed it. She missed the community. She missed that you had, 60-year-olds hiking with 20-year-olds and lawyers hiking with students and and none of that mattered out there.
Yeah, you're so right.
You all had the common goal to get to Katahdin. That was the goal. And you all worked together for that, and nothing else mattered. It didn't matter your background, your education, how old you were. You were just out there as a family. And I do think she missed that.
Yeah.
She was very proud of the accomplishment, for sure.
Yeah. Don't you find that instructive? The fact that people would cooperate with one another, and there was very little. Well, certainly in the year I did, there were very few problems between people. They just seemed to get on, or if they didn't, they'd move on from each other. So, it worked.
Right.
And I love that feeling, which I don't think I've ever experienced in my life, of this collaborative effort almost to try to get this thing done.
Yes. And I do think she missed that when she came back, and, because it's not really like that in real life. We,
That's right.
We tend to look at people a little, differently maybe, but.
I like the way she viewed. You strip all the material things away,
right.
and you're out there
Sure.
with a bunch of folks that are very focused and dedicated and enjoying the experience. And it's a wonderful resume builder too, by the way.
I totally agree.
Everybody
I
asks
totally
about
agree.
it.
Yes, I'm sure. I said to a number of the youngsters I met on the trail, I said, you should put this at the very top of your resume. I think it's such an incredible achievement that you had the fortitude, because a lot of them didn't have the money. So you had the fortitude to go out there and do this. And that would be
right.
impressive, I would think, to any employer, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of educated people we found out on the trail too, the thru hikers that, so it's fascinating to meet and talk to them. And to that point on the resume, it was one of the first things people ask about, because they're amazed that you walked, over 2,000 miles. And
don't keep saying that. Don't keep saying that. I'm doing it again, so don't keep saying that.
Okay, I won't say that.
The thought of another 2,000 miles. Oh gosh,
what a great experience for her.
Yeah, it really was. So, and lastly, well, two more questions actually. What has been, or have you noticed any longer term impact on Stacey? Not the first few days or months after she came back. After 4 years, is there a change in her from your perspective that you think you can attribute to the hike?
Yes. She is more focused on work balance, and she loves the outdoors. She's always planning a hike or a camp, and she's looking at another through hike in the future. And no doubt she'll do that. So yeah, I think it's just given her, she just feels at home in the woods, and just loves that. She just loves that, and that's what makes her happy, and that's her relief. And I didn't see that before she left.
Yeah, I definitely see a balance, an equilibrium, if you will. I mean, it was very, very satisfying, but it gives her even more ambition to continue to do those kinds of things. Maybe to not that extent, but what a wonderful experience and life memory for sure.
And she talks about it all the time.
Yeah, that is our problem. We do. And we talk about the people who don't give a crap. So it's terrible.
Well, what an experience. And I think, I think that if you don't do it, you really can't relate. Like, we can hear all the stories, but I can't really relate to sleeping in the woods with thunder and lightning, or thinking there's a bear, or or being cold, or eaten alive by mosquitoes and all of that. I mean, you can't really appreciate it unless you've done it. No. And so few people have done it.
Yeah. So if there are parents out there who are listening to this, and for example, our guest last week was a girl who started her through hike of the AT just out of high school, just turned 17, went by herself, and was a lot of the time she was by herself because she flip-flopped. So she was all over the place where hikers weren't. What advice, or what would you say to parents whose daughter tells them, and I say particularly a daughter, I think it's much safer obviously for guys, but I would say if their daughter said to them, I want to do this, what would you give them one piece of advice?
Well, I think that the trail family comes together pretty quickly. Yeah. And that's very comforting, because we were concerned, as we said earlier, that she would be alone. And that transpired as we've said. So I think people care about one another on the trail. So that should give people comfort, no matter who goes on the trail and what age, for that matter. Mm-hmm. Everybody embraces each other, and you're on the same plane. That's right. I think that's important.
And we were fortunate enough to fly out and meet her. We met her at Trail Days in Damascus.
Right.
So we were able to meet some of the people she was actually in the bubble with. Nice. And then we went another time, and we were fortunate enough to meet Miss Janet, who gave me, she gave us her contact information, and she said, I follow the bubble. If you're ever worried about her, or you can't reach her, whatever it is, you can contact me, and I will try to find out, where she is and what's going on.
Miss Janet is the ultimate trail angel. She really is.
Oh, yeah. She's wonderful. She's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And Steve, the other part, the spot did really help us a lot to feel comfortable. And I'm not doing an advertisement for the spot or anything that can, give you comfort on where your daughter or son is. It gives you comfort for sure. Yeah.
Because she did have a lot of problems with cell service. She didn't have it most of the way.
Wow. I had AT&T, and I called my wife every day but one. I was able to call my wife at some stage.
Verizon.
Everybody says Verizon's better, but I didn't find people had a great experience with Verizon, but certainly for me, AT&T was better. But look, I think, and I knew that you were going to be kind of reassuring, and I know that Stacey is a sensible, balanced young woman anyway, and I suspected it might have had something to do with her parents. And I think you've just proven that you looked at it almost intellectually. You looked at it and thought, this she's sensible, she knows what she's doing, she's done her research, and really, as long as that you knew where she was, that was great for you. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about it.
Thank you.
Well, of course, thank you.
Lovely. Well, good talk to you, and hopefully we'll talk again one day. Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye. I really enjoyed talking with them both. I thought their attitude was questioning but loving. I'm not sure you can do any better than that. I hope that it gave some of you some encouragement when your nearest and dearest makes their big announcement in the future. By the way, I spoke with Kathi later, and she corrected herself. Stacey was on Verizon, not AT&T. I bet there were one or two of you shaking your heads in disbelief at that. Now we're on to chapter 4 of The Year We Seized the Day, where Ellie wakes up after an amazingly long sleep and has to decide if she's going on or going to Paris. I'll see you next week. Chapter 4, Day 3, Bilaba, and we're not going nowhere.
Ellie. Are we there yet? I woke to an empty room, disoriented, and looked for a clock. A note sitting next to a small pack of tea bags on the bedside table reads, Manzanilla infusion. It smells like chamomile. I know I am in Spain, but don't know where or how long I've been asleep. I can't even remember how I got here. It feels like days have passed. I kick back a cocoon of blankets and sit up on the edge of the bed. I feel weak, lightheaded and sore all over. Each breath is hollow and moving sparks flecks of tiny stars before my eyes. Despite the heavy throb in my head and chest, I can feel the fever has left my body. Whatever it was, I'm through the worst of it. My digital watch reads 12:15. I pull back the curtain to see if it's midnight or midday. Light pours in. Squinting, I count back and realise that I've been asleep for 25 hours. A priest finds me standing in the kitchen getting water. Unsure of who he is, I begin to apologise, but before I can finish, he rushes towards me, placing his hand gently on my forehead. Bien, he says. I'm trying to learn 3 new Spanish words each day. Bien was one of Monday's words. I offer him a smile. He pinches my cheek. Very much better, he says in fractured English, explaining that he'd been in to check on me earlier and change the blankets, which were soaked with sweat. You eat now, he insists, bunching his fingers together and raising them to his mouth. Yes, please. I haven't eaten since dinner 2 days before and soon lost that. I ask the gentle priest if he's seen Colin. He raises both the index fingers and places them either side of his head. San Fermin. We must be close to the city. The monastery is within earshot of festivities. I think back and remember Colin mentioned heading into Pamplona for the day. Hearing the Swede, Victor, talk about the bull run has appealed to some primal male instinct. Then again, he also suggested staying close to make sure I was okay, but maybe I imagine that. My recall is questionable. I started that conversation by asking him if it was yesterday today. The priest uses numbers on his watch to explain that he'll open the doors to the day's new wave of passing pilgrims at 3 p.m. Until then, I am confined to the small refuge and its modest courtyard garden, which is enclosed by a 12-foot stone wall. He leaves. Wrapping a notepad, pen and bottle of water in a blanket, I wander outside into the garden. The air is crisp, but the sun is warm on my skin. Laying the blanket out on the grass, I sit cross-legged beneath the branches of a solitary tree and let the situation settle in. With Colin gone, presumably for the day, and just 3 stray cats for company, I have time and space to think. We've already been forced to take the first of only 5 rest days allocated for the entire journey. Great start. Though he hasn't said it, I know Colin questions my ability to complete this trek, or, at this rate, to make it through another day. I don't blame him. I warned him before we came. My mind is both my biggest weakness and my greatest strength. It's created havoc in the past and has the potential to ruin everything. It is obvious that what happened on the bus to Roncesvalles has taken its toll. The sudden sickness and fever were little more than physical manifestations of doubt and fear. My head and heart were locked in a battle, and my body paid the price. I came to the Camino with a purpose: to find the part of myself that remembers what it is like to feel strong and confident. Simon and Mercedes, the young couple we'd met, seemed as determined and certain of their destination as I hoped to be. I hated appearing weak before them, but I've grown to distrust my body. It's unreliable. There's a certain pain that lingers close to death, and once you've felt it, nothing else seems to register. I tend to break down now long before I realise it's time to stop. I take my pilgrim's passport from around my neck and unfold the concertina pages, laying it across my lap. Your pilgrim's passport is your badge of honour on your Camino, issued to you at the start of your pilgrimage. It contains numbered squares that represent the towns and villages you pass through on your way. Every establishment and albergue, from Roncesvalles to Santiago, has their own unique stamp. Presenting a passport full of evidence at your final destination authenticates the completion of a pilgrimage, and you are awarded a certificate, still written in Latin, called the Compostela, marked with the official seal of the Sacred Church. There is one catch, however. In order to qualify for a Compostela, your first-class ticket to the afterworld, you must state when asked that your official motive for journeying the Camino involves some spiritual purpose. If not, your Compostela is demoted to a measly certificado, and there's no getting into heaven with one of those. This makes your pilgrim's passport on the Camino the equivalent of a CV in the corporate world. Mine to date wouldn't land me a job as a tea lady in a call centre. Just 3 of the 48 squares contain stamps. The first from Roncesvalles, the second from the Olberg and Zubiri, and the third here from the monastery. We still have so far to go. 45 squares. 4 weeks. My challenge now is to convince myself, despite evidence to the contrary, that I am actually capable of completing the journey. If I can make myself believe it, then we at least stand a chance of reaching Santiago sometime this year. Opening my notepad to a fresh page, I write an affirmation that I hope can become my new truth. Then repeat it until I fill the next 3 pages front and back. Each and every step makes me stronger, without and within. Later that evening, Colin returns and sits down beside me on the bed. So, how do you feel? Good. Okay, he smiles. Now tell me how you really feel. I laugh. I am good. Better anyway, thanks. He explains the bus schedule to Paris and begins to run through options for a flight home. But I've already made up my mind. We can't give in this early in the trip. Let's get up and start walking again tomorrow. If something happens further down the track, at least we'll know we gave it everything. Colin looks concerned and hands me a note. Colin and Ellie, good luck and safe travelling. A pleasure to meet you both, Simon and Mercedes. P.S. If we don't see you along the way to Santiago, send us a quick message to let us know you're both okay. The note makes me even more determined to get going again. I ask Colin to promise, no matter what happens between now and Santiago, he will not stop believing in me. And even if he does, he can't let it show. I don't always trust my own judgment, but this way, when I doubt myself, I'll trust him. If he thinks we can, then we will.